Right. Hi, I'm Amanda. I'm the nutritionist here. And so we're going to talk now about the emergency preparedness and food safety. Um, so obviously last week we had a giant storm, and then this week it's looking like there's going to be ice. And so that always ends up being fun for everybody, especially because then we have the possibility of the loss of power, which is, I think, the biggest hurdle as far as food safety goes. And so some of our suggested emergency food supplies there too. So you always want to have at least a several day supply of non-perishable food, including bottled water. About a gallon of water a day per person is recommended to have on hand, just in case. And then at least a several day supply of your non-perishables with choosing foods your family will eat. So you want to remember any special dietary needs too. So if you have someone in your house who's diabetic, if you have someone in your house who needs more of a low sodium diet, you do want to consider that when you're putting together your list as well too. So you're ready to eat canned meats, fruits, vegetables, and of course a can opener. There's the pop tops there, which do help, but you always want to make sure that you do have a can opener. And then it's actually one, not an electric one either, because in case power goes out, we want to still be able to use it there. So something to keep in mind too, again, with that, the special dietary needs too, we want to pay attention to the sodium. It's not as much of an issue for just a few days there too, but just making sure that we're having some decent options on hand too. The protein or fruit bars too, the dry cereal or granola. Peanut butter is a great option there too. Dried fruit, that is also very high in sugar too. Portion size ends up being really important with that one. So we don't want to overdo it with the dried fruit, but it does end up being a nice thing to add on into a little trail mix or something with some nuts, some of the granola, something to snack on. And that also goes towards the end of the list there too, your comfort and stress foods there too, because when you're sitting in the dark and you don't have anything else to do and it's cold, it's not really a great time for anybody. Your canned juices there, we want to be mindful that we don't overdo it with those either. You can always do Crystal Light packets instead to go into your water. The non-perishable pasteurized milk, high energy foods there. So things that do have a lot of the fat, like nuts, like the peanut butter, the canned meats there too. Food for infants, if you have any in your households there. And then our comfort, our stress foods there, the snacks. So one of the things, so the most important thing to always keep in mind, and I'm going to gear this a lot towards losing power there, because that, I think, it, like I was saying earlier, it's the biggest problem as far as making sure that we stay safe and that our food stays safe there. So the temperature danger zone is between 40 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit there. And that is the temperature danger zone because that is when bacteria is going to be it's going to have the easiest time growing. So that's why you should always make sure that your food is kept refrigerated, that you don't leave food sitting out for more than the 4 hours or 2 hours or even less, depending upon what the outside temperature is like there too. And so one of the things to consider, the Fat Tom is a good reminder as far as what is the environment in which the bacteria is going to grow the best. And so food, acid, so a lower acid environment is going to be more friendly for bacteria to grow. The time that it's going to be out, the temperature, if it's between that 40 and 140, that is going to be a shorter time span there, as well as the amount of oxygen that it has in there. So a sealed container is going to have less oxygen, so it's going to have less of a possibility of bacterial growth, as well as the moisture content. So that's end up why our bread ends up having a fairly high moisture content. And so you'll end up seeing your moldy bread there when it's sitting out because it's getting that moisture on in there, which is encouraging bacteria growth. So the food does actually provide a great environment for it because it has the nutrients and the energy in there that the bacteria wants as well. It doesn't grow well in the acidic conditions there. So your citrus, your tomatoes, vinegary type stuff there too is going to be less likely to spoil as quickly as things like your bananas, your a lot of the lettuce, things that end up, which ends up being another reason too why you end up seeing like the recalls on lettuce pretty frequently, because it does provide an environment in which bacteria can grow more easily. So those are the high points of that. They really, so as far as the food storage goes there too, again, that water, the 1 gallon per person per day for the drinking, cooking, and then the personal hygiene if necessary there too. The ready to eat canned foods. So your vegetables, fruits, beans, meat, fish, poultry. I'm sorry.
I'll mute everybody.
Okay. Any kinds of pastas there too. So even things like Chef Boyardee, things that you can just pop, SpaghettiOs.
Whoops. Wait. Sorry.
Oh, no problem.
Okay, go ahead.
So here I am. So those end up being a good option for those quick and easy meals that you can fix. If you don't have power, you can use, or you can get creative if you have a little camp stove. You always want to have the meals that don't necessarily need any kind of a preparation. If it's the peanut butter and jelly, you can use the jelly as long as it hasn't been sitting in the refrigerator for too long, or just anything along those lines too. Sorry. Okay. And so cereal, the milk, we don't necessarily want to go for the milk from the refrigerator. That's also why it ends up being a good option to have the pasteurized milk that is just shelf stable, that you can always just pour, and it doesn't matter about the temperature there too. Your canned pasta dishes, pretty high in sodium, not a great long-term option there too, but you can eat them cold if you really need to. If not, you can be a little bit more creative with some ways to actually heat them on up. A little sterno pan there. There's a few different options. Your camp stove, if you end up having one. The soups, again, they don't necessarily need as much heating there. They're already canned and pasteurized or preserved there before they all get set on in there. Your smoked or your dried meats there. The commercial beef jerky is, again, that good snacking option. Sodium, also a concern. So you do want to not overdo it there too, but it is something to be able to keep on hand there. Your dried fruits and vegetables. Job Lot ends up being a great place to be able to go for finding stuff like your dried figs, the apricots, any of the things that you might want to just have around, just to be able to find them quickly and easily there. Your juices, again, you don't necessarily really want to have the juice. If you feel like you need a little bit of the juice there, you can always go with the flavor packets and then add it to the water. Even though it's a stressful and uncommon situation, we still don't really want to go overboard, because at the end of the day, we still have to consider our health too. And especially with the prevalence of diabetes there too, chances are somebody in your house doesn't really need it there. Again, the milk, the powdered, canned, evaporated, something where you can just open it on up and you don't necessarily need any kind of refrigeration for it. one of the things about that too is that when it's cold, you don't necessarily want to keep stuff outside in an unsealed container. But if you do need any kind of the refrigeration or the coolness just for taste purposes there, make sure it's in the sealed container, and then you can just grab it back in whenever you need it instead of opening on up. Another factor consider there too is that it was freezing like that. You can always freeze blocks of ice and then stick it on in your refrigerator and your freezer in order to help use the ice, not necessarily having your items from out or from in your freezer outside. And that also helps preserve them from a safety standpoint too, to make sure that you don't have any critters coming on over. Your staples there, your sugar, salt, pepper, your instant potatoes and rice, the coffee, tea, cocoa mix there, having some way to warm things on up. If not, making sure that you end up having the colder alternatives available there too. You're ready to eat cereals, instant hot cereals, crackers, hard taco shells there. You can always make like a little taco, the walking taco mixes there. You can throw in some canned diced tomatoes along with a little bit of the lettuce and salsa. And then, so especially for things like salsa, it doesn't need to be refrigerated until it's been opened, but then you do want to stick it in the refrigerator once it's been opened to make sure that it doesn't, because it's sealed prior to opening. Once it does have that seal broken, then you do want to make sure that you are keeping it safe there. But the refrigerator and freezer thermometers end up being a great help to you during this time too. So they have even just like little sticky ones that are very inexpensive that you can just have, or it just put on in there to know. It's a great way of making sure that your temperature of the fridge is safe to begin with too. But especially before you're planning or before you're thinking that there is potential for the loss of power there, making sure that you're still able to see what the temperature is inside, because that's going to be a huge help to you as far as determining what you can eat, what you need to throw away, what can be reused. It's a couple of dollars that can end up saving a lot of money in the long run if your food ends up staying safe. Again, those high energy foods there, the peanut butter, the jelly, the nuts, trail mix, which is usually a little bit of the chocolate, the granola bar with the nuts and raisins, dried fruit, your granola bars, the cookies, hard candy, chocolate bars, soft drinks, other snacks there. Those are your comfort foods there. So the things just to make you feel a little bit less upset about the whole situation there. And so for the optimum length of the storage for the quality and nutrition here too. So the primary things that we really want to focus on would be like the canned fruits and vegetables for about 24 months, they're fine. Jams and jellies, 18 months. So packaged dry beans, peas, and lentils there, 12 months. Prepared flour mixes, 6 months. So that prepared flour mix there ends up being a good source of the food for the bacteria. And it does actually have more of a potential for getting moisture on in there. So going back as to why it ends up being more likely that that one is going to spoil faster than the others. And it's usually more of a flimsy container. So if you did want to put it in a more of a plastic sealed container, it will be able to last longer as well. So another shelf stable foods chart here there. So your the low acid canned goods there, about your 2 to 5 years or 3 to 4 days in the refrigerator. And so your soups, spaghetti, potatoes, corn, carrots, versus your high acid, which ends up being your juices, tomatoes, pineapple, the foods treated with the vinegar-based sauces or the dressings there. Your home canned foods, you want to avoid keeping those ones around after you lose power, because that's a lot of faith in how well you were able to seal it beforehand. For the commercially packaged jerky for 12 months there, any kind of like a dried egg white there doesn't need the refrigeration until it's been opened there. If you go to like a survivalist or surplus store, they will have the MREs there, and a lot of the how long those are going to last is going to depend on the temperature outside or around there. One of the things too for the MREs is that they actually have little heating packets on in there that they will sell separately too. And so you can always just get those heating packets, which all you do is add water to it, and then it will heat on up the food so that you're able to eat it. So these are just some timelines for when it would still be fine. So one of the things about it is that there's not really any standardized dating as far as what is it. There's no real date to determine what food is going to be good by. So if you're thinking about this, so this is directly from the slide here too, you want to always be careful of food that are especially the cans that have any kind of swollen sides there, if the pot or the top actually is popped on out there, because that means that there's likely to be some level of the bacterial growth pushing it open. So if it's dented, if there's any kind of damage to the packaging itself, if it's leaking, so any way that you can see that something could have gotten inside, just avoid those ones there too. As well as if the can has rust along the seams, don't buy it there. And so food does have to, it should be kept at the 41 degrees there. So commercial establishments will always have to have, it's called a HACCP plan there. It's the hazard analysis of critical points. And so there always is going to be a plan for a commercial establishment for making sure that food is going to stay at a safe temperature there. Sometimes things don't work out the way they're supposed to, but for the most part, they're very, very aware of the dangers that having things outside of temperature can cause. So the refrigerated foods in particular, don't use them past the use by or the sell by dates there. And what those dates are really determining is it's the quality of the food. It's not talking about what value that actually has. And so again, if there's any kind of damage to the packages, don't use them. And if you feel like the labels look a little bit different too, asking the store manager if the labels have been changed, because then you might have issues of there being different ingredients or a different lot number that you're not necessarily able to follow. And so for your eating the safe foods there too, one of the appliance thermometers ends up being huge, making sure that you do have a cooler or frozen ice or dry ice available there too. Keeping your refrigerator and your freezer doors closed as much as possible. Having a list of the contents of your freezer so that you don't have to go searching haphazardly through there. And then afterwards, you don't want to decide if it's safe to eat by tasting it. If it looks off color, definitely go for that one there too. The perishable foods there, if you haven't had power for 4 hours or more without a cold source, any food that has an unusual color, odor, texture there, and then the temperatures of the foods there are going to be your biggest saving grace. So one of the other, and this is just a little bit more of the breakdown so it's easier to see. The dry ice, the block ice there. So first off, you want to use your perishable foods from your refrigerator, and then using the foods from the freezer to make sure that you're using all of your stocks, so that to minimize your waste there too. And then this is a food safety cooking guideline here too, because you don't necessarily want to have to be cooking. It's a lot harder to regulate the temperature when you don't have a stable food source or a cooking source there. But just knowing what exactly the internal temperatures are there too. So basically the beef there is going to be the 145, the pork is going to be 145, and then most of your other option, as well as the fish, and then your poultry, your casseroles, ham, those are going to be your 165 there. And then for this after there too is it's better to throw out the food than it is to get sick there too. So if you feel like there is any possibility of there being contamination too, just get rid of it. Again, those meat thermometer or the meat thermometers, as well as the thermometers for the refrigerator and the freezer, can be a huge help to you for making sure that things have stayed safe. And then the other piece of that too is that that last line there too. So if you have the appliance thermometer in your freezer, so you want to check to see if it's still 40 degrees or below. And so you can refreeze or cook the frozen food that still has the ice crystals or stayed at 40 degrees or below. But that's about that from what I have. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Well, thank you. I do have one question, and we have Michelle on the line too. So you said something about a camp stove, and I have the impression that we're not supposed to use those camp stoves in the house. So I want to clarify that, and then if Michelle has something to say, she can unmute and tell us.
Hey, I definitely, that one kind of made the hair on the back of my neck go up a little bit. I'd like to caution anybody with any alternative ways of hopefully we won't come to that. But a particular concern with any open flame is the carbon monoxide. So make sure that there's working detectors in your home. Any kind of burning fuel source can create carbon monoxide. You won't see it. You won't smell it, but it can kill you. So it's critical that anything like that is done with extreme caution, and to make sure that your detectors are working, and pay attention to them if they go off. So they'll know more than you will in the event of a hazard. And if there's any questions, please just call it in 911 and somebody come out and check for you. In the meantime, we hope everybody stays warm and safe. A particular concern, particularly after the tragedy in New York, is the space heaters. Anybody using space heaters, keep in mind that they do need space. Hopefully we won't lose power and everybody will be nice and toasty. But if you do need or use a space heater for supplemental heat, please make sure that it's not near anything that can burn. And don't leave it on and go to bed. Or so yeah, so it should be 3 feet. And it's funny, I have one myself at home and the cord is only 28 inches. So I was questioning that, how are you supposed to do 3 feet if they make them and the cord isn't even that long? So if you do need to use an extension cord, to make sure you use a heavy duty one. The little Christmas lights extension cords are not sufficient for a space heater. So you want to make sure you have the right size into the right equipment for your own safety. The other thing that we're talking about this month, particularly with all this fluctuation in the weather, is keeping people off the ice. We'll do everything we can to get people off the ice before the dive teams have to go in, because that never ends well. So that's another one. If you see someone in there on the ice, it's not safe. So let's do whatever we can to get them off. Also to remind people, if you need smoke detectors or there are issues with your smoke detectors, you can always reach out to us and we'll do whatever we can to ensure that you have the right equipment to keep you safe.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Amanda. And I will send out this this PowerPoint because it's so full of information. I think everybody would love to digest it. And because of time, I'm going to close off the Q&A right now, but I do appreciate it because Gwen is going to speak. And if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and we will definitely get back to you. So thank you so very much. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay.